Okay, welcome to the evening, Why Weight Loss Feels Harder in Your 30s. I'm Dr. Michelle Stanton. Thank you for being here this evening. We are going to be talking about, of course, the changes that happen from your 20s to your 30s, but please believe me when I say this is not specific solely to the transition from your 20s to 30s. So if you are heading into your 40s, or if you're, in the 20s getting into your 30s, or 40s into 50s, a lot of this is going to apply to a lot of the transitions. And of course, we know there's nothing, it seems like there's something magical from, the night you turn from the night you're 29 and then you turn 30, or the same, when you're 39 and then you turn 40. But there's actually no, as we all know, no physiological like timestamp that says, okay, now you're in your 30s, this is what's going to change. But we do know that just in general, there are changes that come with our 30s, our 40s, just every decade, things change in our body. So that's what we're going to be talking about. But you still will learn something about yourself, even if you aren't in this specific like decade of life, because there are kind of global truths when it comes to just transitions metabolically in general. So I think what is validating to hear is that you're not crazy. Things that used to work in your 20s now don't work as well in your 30s. And no one really prepared you for that. Like people, there's this big taboo of returning 30 in general. But then no one really tells you like what is that exactly is going to change, and doesn't have to be all bad. It's just we aren't prepared for it. And so when it slaps you in the face when you wake up and you're 34 and all of a sudden your knees hurt every morning, for example, that can be very jarring. And no one tells you some of these like subtle nuances of aging into a new decade that maybe if you were prepared for or you had a little bit of a plan for, they wouldn't slap you in the face quite as hard when they creep up on you. And if weight loss is feeling harder for you than it used to, you're not imagining it and you're not crazy. And most importantly, you're not failing because your body responds to signals differently as we age. And it may be hard to hear me say over and over, as we age, as we get older, blah, blah, blah. But just give me a little bit of grace. That's the easiest way to say it. You're not old when you're in your 30s. I mean, even when you're 39, you're not old. So don't get down on yourself. Let's just kind of breeze past some of the verbiage that we have to use just for simplicity's sake in this master class. But your body does start signaling differently, and your metabolism does start responding differently. There are just fundamental shifts that come with getting older. And so when you're in your 30s, your metabolism truly does work differently than when it did in your 20s. So before you start changing everything and saying, okay, well, I have to go back and do exactly what I did in my 20s because I know it worked, or before you upend your entire life, start asking yourself, what stress signals am I sending in my body right now? Because that is going to be a big thing that we're talking about this evening, is the stress signals that your body is going under or is receiving, because that can be a lot of where that fundamental metabolic shift is coming from. So in your 20s, you just have a higher stress tolerance. I explain it like you have a stress bucket. Everybody has a stress bucket. My 2-year-old patient that comes in has a stress bucket. My 4-year-old or my 4-week-old baby that I just adjusted this morning has a stress bucket. The 30-year-olds have a stress bucket. Your 40-year-olds, you're going to have a stress bucket. Men, women, everyone has a stress bucket. And in your 20s, your stress bucket is bigger. It's deeper. And so you can pour in a lot more stress into that bucket before you start really feeling any issues with that physiologically, mentally. But then as you get older, your stress bucket, two things happen. One, your stress bucket gets a little bit smaller. Your capacity for stress gets less. And your stress bucket just kind of stays a little fuller. And so stress accumulates more readily, a lot easier. Your recovery slows down, so you don't empty your stress bucket quite as quickly. And so that's all, not the big issue. The issue is when your stress bucket starts overflowing and then you start feeling the effects of that stress. And that can be stubborn weight loss. It can also be achy joints. It can be chronic headaches, lots of just weird symptoms that you can't shake. That's when your stress bucket is overflowing. And when you're 30s, like I said, your bucket fills up faster and it's harder to bail, stress out of your bucket. And so the result becomes your cortisol, which is essentially your stress hormone, becomes a primary metabolic driver. And that is going to influence where you store fat because cortisol in particular loves belly fat. And what woman in her 30s is not just sick of that little pooch on her belly? Um, and a lot of it comes with like the mental game, right? Like we kind of do it to ourselves, but we do tend to store more fat around the belly because cortisol is high and cortisol loves to accumulate belly fat. And it's also going to affect how you burn energy, so how you bail things out of your bucket and how you release weight, excess weight. So if life is feeling rushed and full, just assume that it's not because you're in your 30s. Maybe it's because there's just a lot more signals coming at you. We don't need to be more intense with our efforts. We need to be more pointed with our efforts. And that is going to unlock some progress that you maybe haven't experienced here lately in this decade of life. Because when we are in our 20s, in your 30s, you can look back and say, gosh, my 20s, I could do it all. And now we're in our 30s, I'm like, gosh, I still want to do it all. And I kind of have to do it all. I mean, maybe you're a mom, maybe you're a wife, maybe you're a boss, maybe you're all three, maybe you're none of these, but you have a lot of other titles and you're doing it all now. And you were doing it all in your 20s, but doing it all in your 30s, there's just a lot more. Typically, there's a lot more that comes with life in your 30s. And if you're still trying to do it all, you're just doing a lot more. So maybe you're working, maybe you're higher up in work, or you have a higher title, or you have a lot more responsibilities. Maybe you're caring for family members, maybe that's kids, other dependents, emotionally, physically, your partner. Maybe you have aging parents or older family members that you're caring for as well, that you weren't having to do in your 20s because everybody was just, a decade younger. You're managing possibly a household. You're having to do the meal planning, you're scheduling. A lot of these things come with age, and a lot of them also come with being a female. I'm not saying they all do. And every family is different. Every partnership is different. If you're single, that's going to be different too. But for the most part, women just take on a lot of these things, and even if it's the like the invisible labor, um, it never stops. You're all constantly thinking about the finances. You're constantly thinking about like what kid needs what snack for what party at school, things like that. And so all of those are drops in your stress bucket. And that's not bad. I'm not saying any of this is bad because it's not. It's just we need to be aware of where our stress bucket is getting filled from so we can start to maybe manage that and say, okay, what kind of things can I say no to or do less of? And we also just have less downtime. Like with all of these new responsibilities, just they eat up your time. And so we're not resting, we're not sleeping. We certainly aren't valuing and prioritizing our sleep. And it looks like a luxury to sit and just read on the couch or to get in bed by 9 o'clock. Like that feels like a luxury. And will not be surprised to hear if anybody on this masterclass would say that they don't feel a little bit guilty when they sit down and just relax. Or if they get in bed at, before a certain time, they say, I feel guilty. I have all this stuff to do. And I'm right there with you. I am guilty of that too. If I'm sitting and just relaxing, I feel like, well, gosh, I could be folding laundry while I'm watching this movie. No, like, let's just like chill out a little bit. So that's a primary reason I believe why from your 20s to your 30s, just your whole metabolism shifts and your whole physiology shifts because you're just doing different. And in general, you're doing more. Um, your metabolism responds to total load, and it's not just workouts or calories. So we are not going to be talking about, we're not going to only be talking about workouts, calorie counting, nutrition, because those things affect weight loss, obviously, or weight gain. But there's so many other things that are going to affect that we don't need to hammer those home. People know. that will affect weight loss and weight gain. But things like sleep quality, stress levels, the pace which you're moving through the day, the load that you're putting on your nervous system, that is a key driver to cortisol and why losing weight in your 30s feels harder. Feel free to jump in the chat if there are any questions, comments. It's nice to hear from everybody out there in the ether, instead of just feeling like I'm talking to myself. So if you do have any input or questions, feel free to jump in there. So, like I had mentioned, cortisol loves belly fat. So the science behind this stubborn weight, this paunch on our bellies that we just can't get rid of no matter what we're doing, is that visceral fat around your midsection is significant has significantly more cortisol receptors. And so because it's more sensitive to cortisol, when there's cortisol and more cortisol and more cortisol, that's kind of like soaking it up like a sponge. And so that's why in particular we get that kind of tire around our waist that we just can't seem to shake. And high stress signals will tell your body, go ahead and store fat just in case, because maybe we're not going to have a meal tomorrow, or maybe you need to be a little bit bigger so you can fight off, the caveman down the road. So we are physiologically, we are not a super old, I'm not going to get into it, but our bodies are physiologically like kind of still back in the caveman days a little bit. I mean, it's changed obviously, but we are still primed to protect ourselves as far as, are we getting enough food and are we safe? And if we're not, our bodies are going to do what it can to protect itself. And one of those things is to pack it on, because maybe it's going to be a cold winter and we are not designed physiologically to know, our bodies do not know that, well, I can just wear my winter coat. So we will pack it on, just to protect ourselves. So your fat can accumulate preferentially around your belly, even when other areas just aren't putting it on as much. And does anybody else, like when you lose weight, lose it in your butt and your boobs first? Because that is me and it drives me nuts. Let's leave a little bit there and get rid of the other stuff. But um, we will keep, that area around the belly that is going to accumulate very quickly. And there's a reason behind it. So again, you're not crazy that you just can't get rid of that little belly fat. You're probably wired, but you're probably tired. And so when cortisol is taking over your metabolism and just the processes in your body, you feel exhausted, yet you struggle to relax. You can't sleep. You can't just sit and say, okay, I'm going to enjoy. But you would love to just take a nap at the same time. That is what we call wired but tired. You probably have evening cravings, particularly for sweets or carbohydrates, like the simple carbohydrates. So like cookies, cakes, pastas, breads, things like that. Probably have cravings for those, especially in the evening when you're trying to wind down. And then it is not uncommon to see women who are plateauing despite their effort, plateauing or even going backwards and maybe gaining a little bit of that belly fat. And they're saying, I mean, I was just having this conversation with a friend not long ago, and she said, I feel like I've been going to the gym every day. I feel like I'm eating well, I'm eating good lunches, but I just can't lose this like around my belly. I'm not losing any weight. I'm actually gaining weight, and it's not muscle because I don't feel toned. And I told her very briefly, because this was friend time, that you might need to slow down. You might be doing too much. We need to back off a little bit because you're probably stressing your body out. And things like exercise can be a good stressor on the body until they flip and they are no longer a good stressor. They're a bad stressor. So, speaking of, when overtraining backfires, so what's common is um, you you kind of waltz into your 30s the same way you were handling things in your 20s, and you were doing high intensity, workouts during the week, multiple. You're lifting and you're doing like HIIT workouts, or you're training for your marathon, but then you're still going in and you're lifting, or maybe you're doing really long cardio sessions combined with heavy strength sessions. You're maybe not doing active recovery, and this. I understand not everybody exercises frequently, and that can be a problem too, certainly. But when we're talking about the people that are doing everything right and they're working out and they're going to the gym 6, 7 days a week, or maybe they're doing 2 days, that can really blow up in your face. You're not giving yourself the rest days or the active recovery, and you're probably training hard when you're under fueled because with this kind of mindset, this like, I'm going to work out and I'm going to beat my body into submission so it loses weight, usually comes not fueling our bodies very well, under eating, and also not sleeping enough or well. So, you go into your 30s saying, well, I did it in my 20s. Why can't I do it in my 30s? And we know that that just doesn't work out well. And so, because your stress bucket is a little bit smaller and has less capacity. And so, what happens is instead of actually boosting that fat loss, that pattern is going to trigger a stress response that's going to either stall you out or move you backwards. You're going to have repeated cortisol spikes throughout the day because of your exercise, for one, but you might also be, your blood sugar might be kind of going like this throughout the day, which is going to spike your cortisol as well. You're going to have increased inflammation, definitely prolonged recovery times because you're not giving yourself a chance to recover. You're not taking those rest days. Rest days are just as important as your active, as your workout days. Slower fat loss is, probably going to happen because, despite your efforts, your body isn't getting the safe signal. So it's not going to release that fat because it doesn't feel like it's safe to do that. And then of course we're at risk of injury and burnout. And then you just kind of tank and nosedive and then nothing happens. Nothing gets accomplished when you're in that state. So what we need to do instead of this, like, let me beat my body into submission until it starts losing weight, let's limit high intensity workouts. And that's not to say you can't go back to CrossFit eventually. I mean, I'm a CrossFitter. I love CrossFit, but I can see the mindset of, and not just CrossFit, I can see the mindset of like this like workout community, this very active community, where it can be healthy and then it can kind of transition to, like this burnout, this overtraining. And so we want to, at this point, if you are in your 30s and you're experiencing this where like I can't lose weight no matter how little I eat and no matter how much I worked out, if that is you, this is what you need to start doing. You need to limit your high intensity workouts. That doesn't mean you can't do them occasionally, and doesn't mean you can't get back to doing them more frequently. But right now, we have got to calm your body down and your cortisol down. So restrict your high intensity training, restrict your heavy lifting or your intense cardio just to 2 to 3 days a week, and probably under like 45 minutes because we also don't need to be doing it for twice a week for an hour and a half. Fill those days that you're reducing your high intensity with walking, with yoga, stretching, or just true rest. Like, well, I like movement, like, you know, but nothing's gonna, sitting on the couch one day out of the week for, 20 minutes after a long day of work and before you go run around with the kids or whatever it is, that's not going to stall you out. That's not going to keep you, that's not going to keep your belly fat there if you're adding in a little bit of true rest and recovery. And then listen to your recovery signals, because if your workouts are leaving you drained and you just feel like garbage after your workouts, like, it's okay to feel like you worked hard. That's fine. After a workout, if you're like, oh my gosh, I like my body and like I am just, but when you are truly like exhausted after your workouts and then the next day you're still exhausted rather than energized, there's a problem. And that is your body saying, this is too much. I can't be doing this. We've got to slow down. It's just your body saying it needs an adjustment to the whole picture. So, we've got the camp of I'm going to exercise every day until this belly fat is gone. And then you've got the camp of I'm just not going to eat anything until my body starves all this fat away and it melts away. And commonly we see those two things overlapping into a Venn diagram, and most of the women are in that overlap. Doesn't always happen, but it's pretty common for both of those things to be happening. So under eating may feel like you're doing something for yourself and you are committed, but it might be, again, backfiring. Your body might be like reading that as, oh my gosh, there's not enough food. So I need to pack on this fat because winter is coming and I need some fat on my body, because if I'm not going to be eating through the winter, you know what I mean? Like, I'm using a lot of like kind of far-fetched metaphors, but that is what we are physiologically built to do. And so when you're telling your body, no, you don't get food because XYZ, then your body says, well, okay, well, I'm not going to lose what stores I have because I don't know when I'm going to have my next meal. So that can often look like when people are getting into that mindset of like, I'm just going to cut calories, it can look like coffee only mornings and skipping breakfast entirely. Now, we are going to talk about intermittent fasting. So hang tight on that. But gosh, coffee in the morning and that's it, especially if you're already in the stressed out state, that's going to spike your cortisol like nothing else. So let's put a pin in that, but don't do that if your body, if you are in this like super stressed, can't lose weight, wired but tired state. That is not what you need. It can also look like long gaps before meals. So again, kind of like intermittent fasting, which if done well, can be a great tool. Eating very low calories while managing high stress. Your body needs a certain level of food and calories and nutrition to just operate at baseline. Um, Saving most of your food for the evening, which is not great for digestion and then is not great for overnight when your body is actively trying to heal and recover. It's also having to deal with all this digestion, which is not a great place to be in metabolically. And then feeling proud when you're not hungry anymore, that's not necessarily a good signal that we are not, I intermittent fast every other day and I don't even feel hungry on the days I don't eat. Well, that's not necessarily like a sign that you're winning. Because the metabolic results of these things are your blood sugar is going to be dropping, like I said, kind of dropping and then spiking throughout the day. And with that comes cortisol spikes, and with that comes belly fat. Your cortisol is going to raise to compensate and stabilize your energy because a lot of times, because of that blood sugar being so wacky. Your body is going to shift into conservation mode and so like hibernation mode. And if you think about like what a bear looks like when it goes into hibernation mode, it is packed on with fat. And so your body kind of does that to, of course, a lesser degree. Your fat burning is going to slow, especially around the midsection, to protect your vital organs. And then your evening cravings are going to intensify as your body tries to catch up from everything that it just had to do throughout the day. So if this is the camp that you're living in, and or, last slide when we talked about overtraining, but if this is your camp and you're in your 30s, let's try eating protein in the morning. I don't know, a lot of people do like really carb heavy breakfasts, very sugary breakfast, and that can spike your cortisol and make it crazy, your blood sugar, sorry, and kind of make it, roller coaster throughout the day. But let's start the day with some protein. So 20 to 30 grams of protein within an hour or two of waking up. I know sometimes people just cannot eat first thing in the morning. That's fine. But like within, an hour to 2 hours within waking, let's get some protein in. To lower that morning cortisol and stabilize your blood sugar for the rest of the day, because that really can set up the whole rest of the day as far as blood sugar regulation and therefore your cortisol management. And then let's make sure we're eating some food before your caffeine. So let's not be doing caffeine only mornings. Coffee on an empty stomach, again, that can amplify your cortisol. We want to definitely be pairing it with protein to blunt that spike. And really, if you want to go whole hog, let's cut out the caffeine for a while because that is not doing anybody any favors. The more you need caffeine, the less you should have it. And I'm saying coffee a lot, but just caffeine in general. So the more you need, the caffeine from your Dr. Pepper, the less your body can handle the caffeine because of the cortisol spike that comes along with it. But if you're not ready to give up your coffee or your caffeine in the morning, at least pair it with some protein to help balance out the blood sugar and the cortisol. So I promised we would talk about intermittent fasting and have some grace with me. That could be a 3-hour talk in and of itself for women in their 30s. But we're just going to touch on it briefly. So intermittent fasting can be, like I said, a very powerful tool, or it can be it can be something that really drags you down and stalls out your progress. So it's helpful when stress is low. So like I said, like I don't want someone that's coming in here saying, I can't lose weight. I'm wired but tired. I wish I could relax, but I can't because I have to do X, Y, and Z. I'm not sleeping at night. And I'm also doing 2 days, and I'm like not eating but one meal a day. That is not a person that should be intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is good for when stress is low, when your baseline stress is manageable and you're not in high pressure seasons of life. If that is you, let's start the morning out with some protein. Let's not go long periods of fasting. When your sleep is great, when you can fall asleep at night, when you lay in bed and it's good, restful sleep, and you wake up in the morning and you feel good, that is a good time to experiment with intermittent fasting. when your calories are adequate. Again, intermittent fasting is interesting because people will do it as a means of calorie restriction. And that is not why intermittent fasting works for weight loss. It works because we're giving the body a break from digesting. And so when you are truly doing intermittent fasting the way it's designed to be done, you're getting all of the same amount of calories, that you're supposed to be getting just in a smaller feeding window. And so intermittent fasting is not about cutting calories. So if you are getting enough calories throughout the day and you want to shorten that feeding window, that's okay. That's intermittent fasting and that's fine, but you still have to get all the calories that you need and the nutrients that you need. And then it's good to start out with shorter windows, of feeding windows or shorter fasting windows, just to see how you do and how your body handles it. We don't want to shock it into like a 20-hour fast window, 4-hour feeding window. That would be very hard on the body to get used to. And so start out with like 12 to 14-hour windows. It's not extreme. Maybe you're just pushing your breakfast a little bit later in the morning or moving your dinner up or your last meal up in the evening a little bit. Again, that is if your stress is low and your baseline stress is manageable. So intermittent fasting gets misused when we are layering stress on stress on stress, because intermittent fasting, like exercise, is a stressor. It's a hormetic stressor, which means it's a good stressor to the body until it flips and then it's a bad stressor. And we are layering more stress on top of this. And of course, you're not going to lose your belly fat. If you're layering it on top of poor sleep, high life stress, crazy intense exercise training schedules, that is not a time to be intermittent fasting. If you're being too rigid with it, because that in itself can stress you out, and that's not going to do you any favors. We don't want to be too rigid with our intermittent fasting schedule. Extreme restriction, again, is when you're really cutting out either calories or you're really cutting down your feeding window time, because we also don't want to be eating like 2,000 calories within 4 hours. That's not good on the digestive tract. And so if you're doing it for prolonged period or time throughout the day or prolonged periods. So women can typically do like a good, healthy intermittent fasting schedule for about 6 weeks before it starts actually kind of taking a negative turn on our hormones. And so if you're doing it for a couple weeks at a time, then you go back to just regular meals, meal timing, and then you want to kind of layer it in like that and alternate like that. That's more acceptable. That's more appropriate, especially for like the female physiology, because all humans are cyclic. Women are obviously very cyclic. Men definitely operate on a cycle as well, but women operate much more heavily on a cycle. And so when we do things in cycles, and you can definitely intermittent fast within your just your menstrual cycle calendar. So that's something to look into as well if you're considering intermittent fasting. But the last thing you want to do when you're in intermittent fasting, if you are experimenting with it, is ignore the signals that your body is receiving. You don't want to push through fatigue, irritability, worsening symptoms, just to, hopefully get somewhere, or just to like do it right. You have to listen to your body. To ignore your body's signals is not going to get you where you want to go. So again, just start with the 12-hour feeding window. If this is something like, if you are stress is low, sleep is solid, calories are adequate, you're going to do shorter windows. Let's start with a 12-hour eating window and see how you do. 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and you don't eat after 7 p.m. and then you don't eat again until 7 a.m. And then if that does well for you, then you can crunch that down a little. Maybe you don't eat breakfast until 8 a.m. or maybe your last bite to eat is at 6:30 p.m. instead of 7. So doing this and doing it gently is going to let you know how you respond to it without adding a whole bunch of extra stress on the system, which I hope I've made clear is like the exact opposite of what we want to do. Stress is the enemy when it comes to losing weight. Another thing, women in our 30s, and I'm in my 30s, I didn't make that clear. I am. So I am like right there with you. I've got kids. I've got a husband. I've got a business I own. I've got parents that luckily don't need a lot from me, but they do need a little bit from me. And so, I've got stuff coming at me from all angles. I want to work out. I want to look hot in a bikini like I did in my 20s. So I get it. And one thing that is very easy for us women in our 30s to do is act like sleep is an option. Like sleep is an afterthought for most of us, but sleep is not just like a passive thing to help us recover or to rest and feel less tired tomorrow morning. It is active recovery. Like we are actively rebuilding, recovering, healing, detoxing while we sleep. Sleep is a very important metabolic tool. And so when we act like it's not important, guess what? Our body is not going to give us the benefits that we could get from the sleep. So sleep is going to help us set our cortisol rhythm. Your cortisol spikes in the morning within reason to wake you up. And then it starts tapering off throughout the day when melatonin starts rising up at night. And so your melatonin's high in the evening, your cortisol should be low. And your sleep is going to reset that cortisol, melatonin, that circadian rhythm. So we need it for that, for the rhythm. And again, we are cyclic beings, not just monthly, but daily. We are cyclic. It also helps with insulin sensitivity. So, one night of poor sleep can impair your insulin response, just one night of poor sleep. And think about how many good nights of sleep you've had in the last, we'll say, week. Um, it's a little bit tough right now because it's Christmas and like the New Year's week. So, maybe not this week. I'm going to give you a pass. But in general, like how many weeks or how many days out of the week do you get like just good, solid, went to bed at the appropriate time, slept through the night, woke up at the appropriate time, sleep? And so that a bad night of sleep can make blood sugar harder to regulate, which is going to dysregulate our cortisol and it's going to make our fat easier to store and it's going to make it harder to lose. Sleep is also when our growth hormone is going to peak, and less deep sleep means that less fat is going to be metabolized overnight. If you don't have an Aura ring, those are a really cool tool, and you can see like on your app, yeah, I got it this many hours of REM, I got this many hours of deep sleep. So it's just like a cool tool. If you're one of those people that really likes to see data, it's a really neat tool to use and you can see how you sleep overnight. You can also like shut off the Bluetooth and everything. So it's nice because you're not getting like a lot of radiation like you would with like a smartwatch or like sleeping with your phone right by your bed. And then sleep is metabolic because it helps appetite regulation. So another hormone that will actually increase during sleep is ghrelin. And so that we have like leptin and ghrelin. And so it's going to, if we're not sleeping well, it's going to decrease our fullness hormones that tell us, yeah, you're full. You don't need to eat anymore. You don't need to snack. You're not hungry to snack. It's going to decrease that hormone and it's going to make cravings harder to resist. It's going to increase those cravings. So sleep is very important to fat loss, to weight loss. And if anybody is trying to lose weight in my office and they are not prioritizing sleep, I say, forget what you're eating, forget your exercise schedule. You have got to sleep and make this a priority. It's that important. So a couple things you can do is dim your lights after sunset, dim the lights in your house. Get some Edison bulbs. They're kind of like those nice, like vibey, orangey kind of bulbs. Put those in all of the lamps in your house and only have those on in the evening. Or if you want to get really fancy and like do firelight or candlelight or like get a oil lamp, that's great because you're not getting all the bright blue light exposure that's going to dysregulate your cortisol rhythm or your circadian rhythm. So having those dimmer lights is going to really help tell your body, okay, I'm slowing down and I'm going to be going to bed soon. Another thing you need to be doing is just in general slowing down your bedtime routine before you actually hit the pillow. So instead of, go, 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 I got to do this. I got to clean the kitchen. I got to, write this down on the calendar. I have to make sure this is packed for the kids and I'm in bed. That is not great for your body to get into a good, deep, restful sleep. You need to get all those things done because girl, I get it. You're in your, I'm in my 30s. You've got to get so much done in the day. But then you take 3 extra minutes once all of that is done and you pray or you box breathe or you read or listen to a nice calming song, sit by the fireplace. Don't scroll your phone, don't watch TV, but do something that is very calming to the body before you hit the pillow, before you physically get in your bed, calm your body down before you get in bed. And that is going to really help send signals to your body that I'm safe, I am done for the day, and I can go to sleep now. And now I'm getting in bed. So do it before you get in bed. And then if you can, get to bed just 30 minutes earlier. Like if you're one of these people that are like, that's me. I do not prioritize sleep. I am not getting the metabolic benefits from sleep like I know I could be. If that is you, just get into bed 30 minutes earlier and just try that. Give yourself more time to just be in bed. Maybe you're not sleeping 30 extra minutes, but maybe your body is starting to rest, extra 30 minutes a day. That can be very powerful too. You don't have to necessarily be like conked out asleep to get the benefits of just being in bed and relaxing your body. So hormones, we know, from our teens, gosh, from our teens to our 20s, hormones, whoo, doggy, are a whole thing. And then when we get into our 30s, yes, we know come menopause, like we all know menopause is out there in the distance and it's coming at us. And we know and we expect like changes to come with hormones, but there are hormones that change from our 20s to our 30s, just like from our teens to our 20s and like from our 30s to our 40s. And so there is a hormonal shift in your 30s. Yes, you can, still have menstrual cycles. Yes, a lot of women still have babies in their 30s, but that doesn't mean that there aren't changes to our hormones. Your hormones are going to respond to stress levels. So cortisol is a hormone, but I'm talking about sex hormones. So like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. Those are going to respond to stress levels. So your cortisol. They're going to respond to your sleep. And your body knows and your hormones know if you're prioritizing sleep or not, if you're using it as a tool. They're going to respond to your nutrition patterns. Are you not necessarily, well, definitely, okay, what you are eating, yes, but the quality of what you're eating, how you're eating, and when you're eating and the amount that you're eating. So your hormones are going to respond to that and they're going to respond to your rhythm and your recovery. So your consistent routines, your adequate rest, your exercise, your overtraining, all those things are going to, shift the needle on your hormone levels, your sex hormone levels for better or for worse. Your hormones in your 30s will influence fat distribution. I don't think that's a surprise to hear, but where weight is going to show up on your body, your belly, your hips, your thighs, that is going to be hormonally driven, sex hormone as well as cortisol. Your fat loss ease is just going to be different. And that's why we're talking about all this tonight. But how readily your body holds on to fat or how readily it releases it will depend on are your hormones balanced and your stress levels. Are they balanced? Your energy and your mood is going to be affected by your hormones and your metabolic rate. So your thyroid function, your insulin sensitivity, your overall metabolic function is going to respond to hormonal signals, sex hormone signals. And so they are not unimportant when we're doing this conversation about, weight loss being harder in your 30s. Sex hormones definitely play a role. It's not all stress, it's not all cortisol. It all ties in together, but cortisol is definitely going to affect your sex hormones and vice versa. So they kind of interplay with each other. So you don't need to necessarily look at it like I need to fix my hormones. We need to support the systems that your hormones rely on and the systems that they respond to. Because if we focus on our inputs, like our stress, like our sleep, like what we're eating, what we're doing throughout the day, how we're treating ourselves, gosh, how we're talking to ourselves and our self-talk, your hormonal output and your hormonal function is definitely going to follow suit. So be kind to yourselves. I guess is the moral of the story there. So now you're not in your 20s anymore. We know that what you did in your 20s doesn't work anymore because a lot of things are different. Your load is different. Your stress bucket is smaller. Your hormones are just different. Your sex hormones, I mean, are different. So let's just say, okay, what worked in our 20s was great. It's not working in our 30s. So let's let that go. And we don't have to completely forget it because, you're still the same person. So we don't need to completely block it out of our mind, but we definitely need a reframe. So let's get a new framework for our 30s. First of all, we're going to focus on regulation over restriction. So we're not going to be doing like super serious or super restrictive diets, super restrictive or super highly intensive exercise regimens. We are going to be focusing on stabilizing blood sugar, managing your stress, creating hormonal balance rather than aggressively working out or cutting out calories or fasting for 20 hours out of the day. That is not us anymore. Maybe in your 20s, sure. Your 30s, it has no business here. So let's like take this feeling. If you can take this action and put it into your physiology, I want you to do it. We are going to slow everything down and be nice to yourself and talk nicely to yourself and give yourself enough food and enough rest time. And then we are going to prioritize recovery over intensity. Because like I said, if we just decrease our high intensity exercises, our heavy strength training days, our long cardio sessions down to 2 to 3 days out of the week, and then replace the other days with recovery, and that can be walking, that can be stretching, that can be yoga. Prioritizing your rest days and your active recovery days, your sleep quality, and your nervous system regulation over just like hammering your body into submission, which is not going to work anyway, so you might as well stop. You will notice a difference, and less genuinely, like genuinely less can be more when we do things like this. You can definitely see a change in your body if you are one of these wired but tired, can't lose belly fat people, and you're in your 30s. Like, you need to move your body, but just less, less intensely. And then we want to be more consistent over extreme. So just doing a small change, even if you implement one small change or two small changes once a week, and you get good at those for a week or two. And then you say, okay, those are good. I feel good with those. Let me add one more thing. Instead of like, these extreme diets, these crazy workout schedules, any of these protocols, they they aren't sustainable a lot of the time. And so if we can do small changes consistently over time, that is going to be so much more effective. And we know that small signals repeated daily and then weekly are going to change your metabolism faster than extremes, because your body learns from patterns, not from like a one-off heroic effort to, I don't know, not eat for 36 hours. So what you can do is start tomorrow. And we just talked about small changes, adding small things in. So I do not want you to take all 6 of these and implement them tomorrow and make them your religion. I want you to pick maybe 2, maybe 3 actions over the next week or two and start implementing them and get good at them and see how your body responds, because one person's eat protein early is going to look different than another person's eat protein early. So see what works for you. So you can do that. You can start out your day with some protein, 20 to 30 grams of protein. You can walk after meals. That's going to be adding in active recovery. It's also going to be adding in movement. And it's a good time to do it after dinner, because then you're revving up your metabolism a little bit. Not like an intense like speed walking, just a nice leisurely walk, 10 to 15 minutes. You can replace one intense workout. So if you're the person that's like, I am not ready to not work out for 6 days a week, maybe, instead of going down to 2 to 3 days a week of intense exercise, maybe you go down to 5 and just try that and see how you feel. Don't not move your body during that time. Still, go walk, go bike, a light swim, things like that. Go to bed earlier. Like I said, go, just get into bed 30 minutes earlier, or some of those sleep tactics that we talked about, slowing down before you get into bed. I want you to, one of the things you can do is build in pauses. And one of your pauses can be that time between doing everything in the evening and getting in bed. But your pauses can also be before you walk into the office in the morning. You rush around in the morning so much. I mean, good grief, you want to talk about a cortisol spike, getting everybody ready, getting everybody dressed, make sure you have everything you need for the day, making sure your shoes match, and then you just walk into a whole day's worth of work. Maybe you can build in your pause there. Or for my moms that stay home, the moms in the 30s that are staying home in the day, that's going to be hard to find a time to build in a pause. But maybe, talk to your partner and see if you can work something out. Maybe before they leave in the morning, you can have 5 minutes to just watch the sunrise or something like that. There's a lot of different ways to skin a cat when it comes to adding these small changes into your day. And then shorten your fasting window. Again, if it's appropriate for you. We already talked about that. I'm not going to go over it again. But if it's appropriate for you to dabble in intermittent fasting, shorten your fasting window. Sorry, shorten. Okay, well, shorten your feeding window if it's appropriate for you. If it's not appropriate for you, you need to shorten your fasting window. So if you're fasting like over 16 hours out of the day and your stress is high and you're feeling terrible, you need to open up your feeding window so you are spreading your intake of food and your consumption more throughout the day. So you don't need to do everything. I would advise you not to do everything all at once because again, we know that that's not sustainable. Just make 1 to 2 to 3 small changes, repeat them consistently, get good at them, see if they make sense for you and your rhythm, and then you can add to that if you want. But that is what's going to shift your metabolic response within a couple of weeks even. So when you need more support, this is all you can take everything we talked about tonight and really run hard appropriately with it, and make a lot of changes. And for a lot of people, that's going to work great. For a lot of women in their 30s, sometimes you need more support because maybe you're doing most of this. I don't know. Or maybe you're like, yeah, that sounds cool, but I don't know how to actually implement that. And that's fine because you are already probably implementing a lot of things in your 30-year-old life. So education creates awareness, and that's great. Knowing what you should do is very powerful, but knowing what you should do is not going to get you the results. Doing what you should do is what's going to make results. And so sometimes that requires working with someone. That is something that I do. We do comprehensive hormone testing. We do test the sex hormones, so like your estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, but we also test the cortisol in the hormone test that we run. And if you were on the Decode Your Hormones masterclass, that's all we talked about was that kind of testing and the benefits of that. And if anybody wants that, I can just send you a link to the replay of that. No problem. But the testing is very important because you can see on paper what are my hormones doing. But again, information is only information unless you know what to do with it and then you actually do something with it. And that's where like personalized protocols and like the program that I run, that's where that comes in. If you do need that extra support, there's a QR code, you can scan it. I will send out a link. So if you think you might need to work with me, if you think like this is all well and good and I can implement some of these things, but I need a little bit more of the personalization, this schedule a discovery call from this QR link or from the link that I will send. And we can talk more about like what my program offers as far as like cortisol regulation, hormonal support, weight loss support, all of those things. It is not a eat 200 calories and work out twice a day for 7 days out of the week program. It's quite the opposite of that, actually. So if that's you, go ahead and schedule a discovery call. That call is free, and it's just me and you talking about like, what are your goals? What is this program? How are they going to work together? Is it going to work together? Does it make sense for you to do it? So you're not going to be out anything other than, 15, 20 minutes of your time. If that's something that you think you might need, I would encourage you to schedule that call. So weight loss in your 30s does not feel harder because you're doing something wrong. And I hope that's what you got out of tonight. Like you are not failing, you are not the worst, you're not lazy, you're fat or like a cow. No, it feels hard because your body is responding the way it should respond to what we're doing with it now. You have a heavier load, so now we need to change things because things have changed. So we want to work with your physiology, and then the progress will become calmer, not harder. I do this a lot. I have my kids with me most of the day and they're great, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you stay home with the kids. It doesn't matter if you're the principal of an elementary school. It doesn't matter if you are on the road, 29 out of the 30 days out of the month. We all need to, in our women in our 30s, we all need to do this a lot more in our day. Maybe that can be the one thing you implement this week. Either way, thank you for being on this call or this masterclass this evening. I have had a lot of fun. I love talking about hormones and this kind of thing, especially for this population because I am this population. So, like I said, I see you and I hear you and I know what you're going through because I'm going through it. And so, hopefully, to hear someone else tell you you're not failing, you just, you could be shifting. Hopefully it's validating. Hopefully it's empowering to say, okay, there are things I can do. And I'm not just doomed to go downhill for the rest of my life through the tunnel of menopause and then into the ground. So hopefully this was helpful. Thank you guys for being on this evening. If you have questions, I will be sending out this replay tomorrow. And if you have questions or clarification, and you're like, what did you say about that? And the replay doesn't help, or you don't have time to watch the replay because you're a woman in your 30s, just shoot me a reply to the email and we can kind of get that discussion going there. So thank you, everyone. Have a great night.